4-year-old Jimmy suffers from a congenital immune disorder, and even when he returns home, he is heavily protected. The bedroom has a huge transparent bubble ball, which is Jimmy's main place of activity, and is equipped with a full set of decontamination devices, so that everything that enters is sterilized. Even his mother wanted to touch him had to put her hands in thick rubber gloves to do so. But Jimmy's life was not boring. His parents were patient with him, and he lived in the bubble ball for 16 years without any worries, until one day Jimmy sees his new neighbor, Chloe. Chloe is a beautiful and lively girl. Jimmy is always secretly looking at her. But within a few days Chloe actually came to him. He was shocked to see Chloe in his room. Chloe chatted with him in a friendly way and asked him if he could play the guitar. He said excitedly that he could play and wanted to teach her. Chloe says she can't today. Jimmy is stunned and drops the guitar in anger. So Chloe says tomorrow. The next day Chloe came to learn the guitar, and from that day on they became close. Until one night when Chloe comes over from her birthday party. She suddenly climbs into the pipe and tries to get into the bubble ball to kiss Jimmy, but Jimmy refuses her. He fears that the germs will make him sick or even kill him, which is not a good outcome for either himself or Chloe, and he can't take that risk. But then Chloe brings her boyfriend to see him, and Chloe's boyfriend Mark is extremely provocative to Jimmy, and the simple Jimmy just listens patiently. However, at night he looked out the window and suddenly hated the omnipresent protective shield of the two embracing each other. It's not long before Chloe comes to tell him that Mark has proposed to him, and she wants to ask Jimmy what he thinks and says she has something for him. Jimmy is depressed and angry. He likes Chloe, but he can't be with him because he has to stay in the bubble to stay alive. So he tells Chloe that he has no idea. Jimmy returns the bubble mouse Chloe gave him to her and says goodbye to her in a bad mood, not noticing the loss on Chloe's face. Later, Jimmy opens the box Chloe gave him and realizes it's a confession gift, and he's thrilled and instantly remorseful. It turns out that Chloe likes him, but he pushed her away mercilessly. He remembered that Chloe had told him that she was getting married in Niagara Falls this Saturday, so he decided to stop Chloe's wedding, but his body wouldn't let him go out like that. So he made his own isolation suit and put it on, then trudged out the door. Jamie stumbled to the bus stop, but he had no money to buy a ticket, so he turned around and left in frustration. At that moment, a bus suddenly came from the front, and he was knocked out of the way. A group of people got off the bus and asked him about his injuries. Because he was protected by a thick plastic bubble and was not hurt, he took the opportunity to ask if he could hitch a ride. The group of people heard the reason without saying yes, and carried him to the car. A group of people singing and dancing around him. Jimmy thought it was a choir, but later when talking to them, he found out that it was actually a cult, and he said it out loud. The group naturally did not like the name cult, so the simple Jimmy was thrown off the bus by the cult group. After Jimmy met an old man who was repairing his motorcycle, he took out the duct tape to help him repair his car and let him drive him to New York. So after the car was repaired, the two rushed to New York. But halfway through, the old man stopped and pulled Jimmy into the casino. He said, "We have to make enough money to go to New York." And he ended up having a lot of fun in the casino. He threw the last coin to Jimmy and said he was going to steal some money to continue to play. But Jimmy was in a hurry and could not spend time here. At that moment he turned his head and saw that the prize on the high table was an electric car. And Jimmy looked at the only coins left in his hand to try his luck. He was lucky and won the prize in one go. So he rode the electric car he won and went on his way. However, he didn't have to ride long before he ran into his parents, who came looking for him. His parents wanted him to go home, but Jimmy wouldn't listen. Jimmy was suddenly hit by a car during the argument, and he was crashed into a train carriage with a group of people with unusual bodies. They say they are from the circus and are going to their boss. The train stops at the end and Jimmy comes out of the carriage only to find that the circus boss is a dwarf. The dwarf finds Jimmy in the bubble ball very interesting and wants him to join the circus. But Jimmy says no. He has to stop his girlfriend's wedding. The dwarf was angry and mocked him. "How could a nice girl marry a guy like you in a bubble ball?" Jimmy is also angry, and in a fit of rage he kicks the dwarf out of the train station and takes a ride with a railroad worker. When he got to a small town, he went into a house to ask if there was a hitchhiker who could give him a ride, but saw a group of people bullying an Indian man. Jimmy is angry and says something for him. The group feels offended and turns around Jimmy again, but they see Jimmy's costume and express curiosity. Jimmy explained that he lacked immunity, so he needed to stay in the bubble to isolate. The group was shocked by this. They thought Jimmy had a contagious disease, so they rushed around and fled the house. In order to prevent Jimmy from spreading the disease, also locked up the house. However, in the panic, an oil lamp fell down. The house instantly caught fire. Jimmy was trapped. In the nick of time, The Indians opened the back door to save Jimmy and drove him away. Jimmy passes out from exhaustion in the car but dreams that Chloe is in danger and is not saved by himself but by Mark, who laughs at his lack of immunity. He woke up screaming, but the Indian who was driving the car was shocked, and in his haste did not pay attention and killed a cow. This scared the Indian. The cow is a sacred object of their people. He was killed. He felt he had committed a serious sin and decided to make a sacrifice for the cow. Jimmy had to leave on his own. He walked for a long time, finally reached the city, saw a taxi. The driver heard that he was going to Niagara Falls. The driver asked for 500 yuan, but Jimmy didn't have any money. He looked up and suddenly saw a lighted sign with a reward of $500, so he ran into the store with great enthusiasm. The boss saw Jimmy and asked him what he was doing here. Jimmy said he wanted 500 yuan. The boss heard that he wanted to participate in the duel, so he threw Jimmy into the dueling pool. After some sparring, Jimmy won with the protection of bubbles. He got the $500 prize as he wished. But he just came out of the store was kidnapped by a group of people. He was kidnapped by a group of people who had met the cult the day before. And it turned out that their leader had made up a savior and said that the savior was carrying a ball. The cult heard is not the last time Jimmy was left behind. So this time, kidnapped him to atone for his sins. But when they kidnapped Jimmy was seen by the circus freaks and rushed to rescue Jimmy. Jimmy slipped out of the chaos and rushed to get into a cab to leave. The next day in the car, Jimmy woke up but found that the driver was not moving but the car was still moving. He was shocked. The driver cannot be dead, right? Ahead of him was a stop sign. The car crashed straight into it and Jimmy was crashed into a store. Today is Chloe's wedding day. He borrows a phone from the store to call Chloe, but the phone is answered by Mark, who tells Jimmy not to bother, that even if he comes to the wedding, it won't change anything. Jimmy suddenly felt powerless. He felt that Mark was right. He was a monster. He couldn't even hug Chloe. Speaking of monsters, he suddenly remembered the dwarf circus. Maybe they were the same kind of people, so he called the dwarfs again. But he didn't expect that the one who answered the phone was his mother. It turns out that his parents met the dwarfs on the road and they were on their way together. When his mother received his call, she was on her way. So Jimmy hung up the phone and grabbed a beer from the store and sat outside to drink it. It didn't take long for his parents to arrive and Jimmy was taken to the car. He sat in the car with a depressed look on his face. His father was so upset that he unlocked the car and let Jimmy go while his mother went to wash her hands. Suddenly he came across a man in a glider and without saying a word, he climbed into the glider. The plane was going very fast and in a few moments he flew to Niagara Falls. Jimmy couldn't wait to jump out of the plane and climb out of the waterfall to the wedding site. His appearance surprised Chloe. He suddenly kissed Chloe regardless, but then fainted. The crowd was shocked and thought he was dead. But then Jimmy's parents rushed in, and his father suddenly said to tell him the truth. It turns out that Jimmy had immunity at the age of 4. Only his mother was worried about him being hurt by the world, so she kept him in the house. Jimmy is unfortunate because he was overprotected under the deception of his parents, cannot be exposed to the freedom and diversity of the world, cannot experience the world's thrill and joy. But he is also lucky because he regained immunity. However, in reality, there are real people who have spent their lives in bubbles. Today's medical advances have been able to successfully save Bubble Boy. But Jimmy's story is one to be savored and pondered.